Well, we've got a working game, so anything now is just going to be improving it, tidying it up, and adding a few more goodies. So I thought, well, I've got in the audio a little tune that I've made for it, so I thought I'd have that playing along with the music, and perhaps it'd be useful or nice to have it fading in and fading out at the end, along with a screen shader to get rid of all the detail and allow us to have a clean screen to start all over again. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the music to the game controller first of all. So I'm just going to drag that onto the game controller, and that will add an audio source and apply the Space March 1 to that clip. I want to loop this piece of music so it'll carry on annoyingly in the background. I've got a volume. I don't really want it high volume, just going along quietly in the background, so around about 0.5, but we're going to do that through code. The other thing I'm going to do is put on a screen shader, so it'd be useful to look at the whole thing in 2D here. Right, and then I'm going to zoom in on the interface, and I'm going to add a raw image. Okay, and I think I'll match that raw image color to the background. I'm going to use the eyedropper. That's fine, so it matches into the background. And I want this to stretch over the entire screen. So I'm going to hold the Shift and Alt, and here we've got a stretch icon in the bottom right corner. So that covers the screen. Now I don't really want it to cover everything. I want to have the game over box and the replay button and the scoreboard in front of this. So I'm just going to raise this raw image, which I rename as screen shader. I'll just move that up in the drawing order. Just there. Okay. So that gives us a nice clean screen after the game is finished. Okay. So what we have to do now is to do something in the code to control these two additional items. So let's go back to the game control script, and we need to add in a few more things here. So I'll put a reference to the shader image. So it's a raw image. A raw image is one that doesn't have any file associated with it. And I'm going to call that shader. Now the other thing I want to do is set the volume of my background music. So I'll put in a float here, and I'll call that target volume. And I'll give it a default value of 0.5 and the F because it's floating point. Now I need to add in a few private variables as well. One is I need to identify the audio source. Now this is a component of the game controller, so I don't need an external reference. And I should call this theme. And the other thing I want to do is, as I fade in or fade out the music, I'm going to do it in steps of 10. So I want to have a tenth of the target volume, which is the step for each time. Right, so I'm going to put a private float, and I'm going to call this volume step. Right, a bit of initialization to do here. I put the start coroutine spawn enemy down at the bottom of the list here because we're handing over control to a coroutine here, so I wanted everything else set out before that. Right, so up here I'll find the audio source, which I've called theme. So I'm just going to get component of the audio source type. And I'll set the volume to 0 to start off with. So audio source has a volume property. So we don't start with any volume at all. Now the next thing is I want to set the volume step. Right, so this is going to be the target volume. And I'm going to divide it by 10, because we're going in steps of 10. Okay, so before I start this, I'm going to do a fade in. So I'm going to have this as a coroutine. And I'm going to call it fade in. Now I haven't actually created the coroutine yet, so that'll be the next thing to do. So where shall I put that? I'm going to put it before the spawn enemy, because the fade in happens before then. So it's a coroutine, so it starts with I enumerator, and it's fade in. Doesn't take any parameters. So what I'm going to do is wait for a short time before we start fading, just a very short time. So I'm going to start with a yield, return, new, wait for seconds, and I'm going to put in, say, half a second, or maybe a fifth of a second. It's going to be a short one. Right, I'm going to make sure that the theme starts at 0. I know I already have set it, but just make doubly sure. Now I'm going to, at the same time, fade out the shader. So I'm going to create a new color. I'm going to call this shade. We've got our reference and it's got a color. Now it's the alpha that controls the transparency of the color. So this one is going to go from an alpha of 1 to an alpha of 0. So I'll set this shade dot A for alpha. So we're going to start off at 1. Now we'll start a loop to go through this 10 times. So it's going to be a for loop. So I'm going to, it doesn't have to be I, but it's quite useful. So this is the control variable. And we're going to go around it 10 times, starts at 0, so as long as I is less than 10, we go around the loop. And each time through we'll increase I by 1. Right, so in the loop we're just going to add 0.1 to the, or subtract 0.1 from the alpha of shade. So I'm going to put that in first. Shade.a minus equals 0.1 f. And I'm going to put that in the shader color. So that's going to reduce the alpha of the shader by 0.1. 1. Next thing as I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the volume of the theme. And I'm going to put that up by volume step, that's the one. And then so it doesn't all happen in a rush, I'm going to give a little pause in there. So I'll put in a yield, return, you wait for seconds, and I think we'll just put in 0.5. So that should give you 10 steps to reduce the alpha of the shader to 0 and bring the theme volume up to our standard step. Now at the other end of the game I want to fade out, and this is going to be very similar, so I'm going to put it in now. Call this fade out for obvious reasons, and this is going to be so similar that I'm going to copy what I've got here and just modify it slightly. So copy that and paste it in here. So I'm going to make this a bit longer to fade out, so I'm going to put, say, 1 second here, and we're going to start off with the theme volume being the target volume, and we're going to start with the shader alpha being 0, and we're going to increase that, so we're just reversing, and we're going to decrease that. Okay, now the last thing we want to do is we call this fade out at the end of the game, and we have got a function which ends the game just here. So I'm going to put in here start a coroutine, fade out. Right, so at the end of the game it starts fading out. Let's check the code. It seems to be fine. So back to Unity, where I have a few things to put into the game controller. At least one thing, I think. So it's put in our shader reference here, so I shall just copy that into this, and we've got the target volume. Check and save, and let's see if that works. So it's faded in. I think that fade in time might be a bit slow. I might sort of reduce the steps for that. Oops, we've got a... I don't know if you can hear the music, but I can. Okay, I've got one. Right, so you don't have to watch me play this game for a long time. I'll let myself be killed, at which point it should fade out. Ooh, looks like I've got a double attack coming up here, and I'm dead, and it fades out quite nicely. Good. And then playing again should cause it to fade in. Yeah, it's a bit slow there, but that's fine.